Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. If you are unfamiliar with us, we are Kew Willow Books. I am Holly.
I'm Dina.
And we are here to celebrate art seeking change, a discussion and reading with poetry and art. So if you haven't joined us on Crowdcast before, we're going to give you a little lay of the land so you know how it works. Over to the side of our panelists, you'll see the chat window. You can say hello there, wave, comment, record lines that you like, however you want to interact over there. If you have a question for our panelists, underneath everybody's faces, there is a call to action. There is an ask a question button. That is where, if you have a question, we'd like you to put it there. That way we don't have to scroll through the chat to find anything for the Q&A at the end. Directly beneath everybody, there's a green button. It says Shop Kew and Willow. That is your one-stop button to pick up their lovely pieces of art. And I think that's pretty much how Crowdcast works.
And I'm going to introduce to the panelists. So today we're joined by Raegen Pietrucha, who is the author of Head of a Gorgon. It's her debut poetry collection. Her poetry, chapbook, and Animal I Can't Name won the 2015 Two of Cup Press competition. And she has a memoir in progress. Hopefully you can tell us about it today. And her work has been published in Cimarron Review, Puerto del Sol, and other journals. And we also have Matthew E. Henry tonight. He is the author of The Colored Page and the chapbooks Teaching While Black and Dust and Ashes. He's also the editor of The Weight Journal. And finally, we have Jackie Liu, who is a fine artist from the greater Boston area and a rising sophomore at Stanford University. And her art has been featured in Instagram, BuzzFeed, Glossier, and XXL. Welcome, everyone, and
take it away.
Thank you. Yeah, so thank you, Vina and Holly, for having us in Kew and Willow. This is kind of a different sort of event and extra special because the cover artist and the person who introduced me to the cover artist are both here tonight to share their art. So I'm going to turn it over now to Jackie so she can discuss Matthew's cover, which was the first book cover I think she ever did.
Yeah, so Matthew, Dr. Henry was my 10th grade English teacher, and I don't think I'll ever be able to call him Matthew with a straight face, but for the purposes of this event only, I will try my best. But so, okay, let me find the window. So I made this approximately a year ago, a little over a year ago, and I made it on the Procreate app on my iPad, same for with Raegen's cover. So my creative process kind of started with looking at the title, The Colored Page, and it's an allusion to a line in Langston Hughes' poem, Theme for English B. So I interpreted this as a searching for identity and also like a proud assertion of Blackness against a backdrop of whiteness. And then I also thought of like a literal coloring page, and I thought it was kind of a fitting metaphor because with the coloring page, you're given a set of black and white lines. So it's like a predetermined set of combining circumstances and structures that society imposes on you and you're forced to navigate, such as Blackness, masculinity, etc. But within that framework, you can kind of make the coloring page your own, such as through like the coloring utensils you choose, or the way you make marks, the way you combine colors, or you can just completely subvert the lines and color outside them. So in both cases, the colored page kind of represents autonomy and identity and self-discovery. So that was kind of the germinating seeds of thought at first, but I didn't really have a concrete place of like what imagery I wanted to include. And then that came when I read a little sneak peek of the manuscript, and a section stood out from the poem when asked what I learned in elementary school, being bused from Madame Pan to Wellesley. The line, history is an art painted in primary colors, white supremacy, white privilege, white fragility, that darker shades are saved for trees, rocks, dirt. So what I wanted to do was kind of subvert the negative connotation of the trees and the rocks and the dirt, and instead center them and like reclaim them, which kind of symbolizes the challenging the whitewashed histories and narratives that we are force-fed as young children. And I wanted the hand to be his adult hand with the intent of juxtaposing youth and maturity in order to convey how adult Matthew is in dialogue with his younger self. And so the adult hand is holding a crayon, which is typically a juvenile coloring tool, which kind of shows the revisiting of adolescence, but through the lens of experience and wisdom, which kind of parallels what Matthew is doing in his poetry. And I also wanted to mirror this theme in how the tree transitions from these childlike scribbles to a more fully fleshed out rendered painting, which represents the possibility of transformation and self-actualization and stuff. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. That's the final cover. That's about all I got.
As always, I'd like to thank Jackie so very much for her work. At the very beginning, she asked me for a picture of my hand, and I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And I sent that along, and then she showed me the cover, and I was like, well, she's brilliant and a genius. I knew that already. I would like to start by reading the Langston Hughes poem that influenced a lot of this work. Both the title and the epigram for the different sections all stem from aspects of this poem. Theme for English B. The instructor said, go home and write a page tonight and let that page come out of you, then it will be true. I wonder if it's that simple. I am 22, colored, born in Winston-Salem. I went to school there, then Durham, then here to this college on a hill above Harlem. I am the only colored student in my class. The steps from the hill lead down into Harlem through a park. Then I cross St. Nicholas, 8th Ave, 7th, and I come to the Y, the Harlem branch Y, where I take the elevator up to my room, sit down, and write this page. It's not easy to know what is true for you or me at 22, my age. But I guess what I feel and hear and see Harlem, I hear you, hear me, we too, you, me talk on this page. I hear New York too. Me? Who? Well, I like to eat, sleep, drink, and be in love. I like to work, read, learn, and understand life. I'd like a pipe for a Christmas present, or records, Bessie, Bop, or Bach. I guess being colored doesn't make me not like the same things other folks like who are of other races. So will my page be colored that I write? Being me, it will not be white, but it will be a part of you, instructor. You are white, yet a part of me, as I am a part of you. That's American. Sometimes perhaps you don't want to be a part of me, nor do I often want to be a part of you, but we are, that's true. As I learn from you, I guess you learn from me, although older and white and somewhat more free. This is my page for English B. For those who don't know, the colored page, beautifully illustrated by Jackie Liu, is a semi-autobiographical journey through my life as one of my students, one of Jackie's classmates said, a raisin in a bowl of milk. From kindergarten through doctoral work and then being on the other side of the desk as a teacher, I've often been the only black or brown face in a classroom. And so this pretty much progresses throughout my life. And I'll read different sections from different parts of that journey. First, as a student. Classical conditioning. We sit in our newly minted desks, Melvin, Matthew, and Matt. Only 3 years from retirement, she finds our names difficult to distinguish. We bear no family resemblance. 2 are black, 1 is white. When a question is asked and more than one of our hands are raised, we're never sure which one she wants, unless she's smiling. Self-evident. As a kid from Boston, the Revolutionary War was my favorite subject in 4th grade. A tea party I could respect, class trips vainly searching for musket balls and Lexington treetops, reading of decapitations by cannonballs on Breed's Hill. Even the sites in Southie, unsafe for me to visit, were a source of tribal pride, like rooting for the Patriots. We were told to don our colonial imagination caps and tell our story of emancipation from the British. Where would we be? The Old South Meeting House, the Old North Church? What would we see as we rose to American greatness? Our teachers should hear freedom ringing in the streets through our words. I dropped my head to begin, oversized pencil in hand, until I remembered. Seeing my inaction, she crouched and began to re-explain. I patiently waited for her to finish, eyes on her lips, then asked if she wanted me to pretend to be white, or to picture myself for sale on the steps of Faneuil Hall, or stacked in one half of the harbor ships heading to and from the West Indies, explaining my parents' patois. After the vocal static, the hems and haws of white noise, she suggested Crispus Attucks, the hometown boy, the black hero of the Boston Massacre. My siblings had taught me the one-drop rule and when to nod my head politely, so I pretended that he was not half Wampanoag, that Framingham was not his master's home, and imagined myself the first unarmed black man shot on these urban streets. This next poem is entitled Essay for History B and is direct references back to Langston Hughes' poem with my own cynical spin on them. Essay for History B. I'm not the duly elected representative of niggerdom who's authorized to speak for all of my people everywhere, but that's exactly how you see me, expecting house Negro hands to eagerly rise and answer your every classroom's question, to play mammy and educate masses children, to do your job in the shortest month, or when topics turn to Atlantic currents, brown sugar, and people. Harriet and Sojourner, Booker T and W.E.B., Malcolm and Martin, Biggie and Tupac. You see me when convenient. When you want me to drink your 2% curriculum, say thank you and smile, showing all my teeth. But when I won't consent to be your magic Negro, when I raise my hand to discuss the beast on my block, the knees which find our backs for walking in your neighborhood, the pistols pointed center mass because my father's taillight was out, you silence me with threats of slipping grades or calling Officer Whitman, without seeing how this too sings of America. Sometimes it seems you do not want to be a part of me or learn from me, younger and black and somewhat less free. You should know, the feeling is mutual. Jumping further ahead of time, I became an English teacher because it's fun. I was a college professor of education. Working with grad students is not nearly as much fun as working with high school students. I mean, you've met Jackie. That's all I need to say. This is, I'll let the title speak for itself. This was midway through my career, I guess. An open letter to the secretary who asked how I haven't taken to drink or Schedule I narcotics like so many of our colleagues. My inward rolling eyes consider the 26 administrators in 7 years, including the principal who put a pregnant woman in a headlock, who said, I gave the Hispanics a soccer ball, what more do they want? Another arrested for battering his wife. The week it took for IT to realize our new email said pubic school. The budget cuts and bomb threats, fire drills, tornado drills, chemical spill drills, the porn accident in physics class, the students discussing which of us would take a bullet with their names on it, later seen in handcuffs, cages, caskets, the cancer in car crashes, the substitute who dropped her panties and shat on the wheelchair ramp inside the library, the teacher caught shirtless with a 14-year-old in her car, the sleepless nights holding secrets like hands after abortions, miscarriages, and becoming a godfather. I don't know how to answer, say to show you a blank page and a pen filled with blood. An open letter for back to school night. Your child was sexually assaulted at a party, almost. A friend intervened as sober hands fumbled against an impaired zipper. Your child is in love with sharp edges. Clothespins, safety razors, and X-Acto knives wait red spotted under the bed, but your maid has yet to notice. Your child hasn't eaten solid foods in 3 weeks, has slit both wrists in frenetic dreams, takes whatever colored pills are closest to hand, drinks until feelings can't be felt. Your child has found your Tinder profile, your stash, the photos, the manila envelopes containing the truth your child overheard that night. Here's what you really mean, even though you're too afraid to admit it. Your child has told me these things because you're too busy posting shit about other parents on Facebook, and they don't want to be a distraction. At my book launch, I read this poem. Surprisingly, there were about 60 people there. 30 of them were former students of mine. And that's a poem that I wrote. In every single line, I was thinking of one of my kids. Some of them were in the room when I read that. Some of their parents were in the room when I read that. Some of the parents who were posting shit about other people on Facebook were in the room. And it got awkward a little bit. I didn't care. I have absolutely no chill. A few more poems. Other than being a black teacher or black student and then a black teacher in predominantly white spaces, I've also been a black writer in predominantly white spaces. I was at a writing conference that shall remain nameless shortly after the passing of Toni Morrison, and a panel was convened to talk about her work. And I was struck by, well, as the title will point out, an open letter to the white feminists holding a literary panel on Toni Morrison. There were no black women, there were no people of color. And while so much of Morrison's work is dealing with like the things that women struggle with and live through and face and triumph over, Morrison was focused primarily on the experience of black women. And so it was just this weird experience of like hearing people talk about her and quote her lines, but that whole aspect was left out of the conversation. So the majority of the images in this poem are taken from Morrison's work, including Beloved and The Bluest Eye and Song of Solomon and others. An open letter to the white feminists holding a literary panel on Toni Morrison. Look to your left, your right. Where are her sisters? Why are they missing? While there's a shared violence only your bodies can know, they were never your breasts from which milk was stolen or freely given to sons with their own white teeth. Your daughters will never destroy dolls, scraping skin to find the beauty beneath, will never see their fathers shot off fences or shucking with Shirley temples while they watch from behind grim windows. You will never slit throats as a slave act of salvation or place a god-tanned pap between gums, yeah, I can read, or place a god-tanned pap between gums with uncertain futures. Your backs are forever clear of chokecherry trees. You whose faces adorn cups, the magazines, the movies, are married to the master narratives she subverts, are intrusive as rusty nails breaking an arch. Move her stilled lips without consulting her face, her family. Forget, she still has a voice. And I'll just read two more. An open letter to the poetry editor of Name Withheld on Advice of Counsel. This was an angry poem that I wrote after. I should also say the poem was accepted for publication. They just gave me some critiques that I later realized were all about, I made them uncomfortable in how I was talking about race, which the editor later realized and apologized for, but I'd already written this poem. An open letter to the poetry editor of Name Withheld on Advice of Counsel. Please don't revise my poem to make my blackness worthy of dating your daughter. Inoffensive and less centered in ways that make you clutch the pearls and purse you thought it was eyeing. Don't evict its diction, tear down and rebuild, so you can sublet my stanzas for artisanal mayonnaise. This isn't Brooklyn. Though you've worked with Rankin and Hayes, Clifton and Cower, Willis Abdurraqib and Walker, your suggested title almost made me wonder if you have hooded sheets. Yes, I meant axed and I just as much as I intended antediluvian and assiduous. I'm sorry, but your cute anecdote about Representative Lewis won't replace my allusion to Huey P. Newton. And those final images are stark and disquieting because I lived them. My immigrant mother lived them. My student, a raisin floating in a bowl of milk, lives them every day. Look, I know I know what my piece was wearing when she left the house. She was appropriately dressed for the occasion and did not need to slip into something you would find more comfortable. But thanks for the feedback. And one last poem. When asked why, all lives don't matter. One of my classroom poems. After a deep breath, I attempted to explain. My aunt had breast cancer. Despite a healthy dose of science and scripture, prayer and prescriptions, the shadows never dimmed. We celebrated her life, mourned the hole her grave dug in ours. We lauded her loving kindness, questioned the natural shocks flesh is heir to, why this disease would claim a wife, a co-worker, a friend, an aunt. At the repast, heads turned to the future, saving other sons and daughters, ourselves. A collection was taken to fund breast cancer research, a medical scholarship for oncology study discussed, a proposal for new. From the back of the church hall, a woman no one recognized screamed, "What about ovarian cancer and prostate cancer? Why aren't you talking about those? All cancers matter." Most of my students nodded into the ensuing silence, but some blank stares and my job description doomed me to be more didactic, to explain appropriate time, place, and manner, intent versus impact, the guilt and shame required to derail communal grief and hijack a narrative to make oneself more comfortable. I explained the human duty to choose. Enter the room willing to bear bodies on your shoulder, or arms empty, leave, and silently stand outside. I said, replace cancer with lives, and waited. Thank you.
So I typed it out, but Matthew, your work is tremendous, and I just love your book. In addition to it being, such an important and socially relevant and constantly relevant subject, there is quite a bit of humor actually in the work, and I noticed some of those moments in a few of the poems that you read, but I would like to encourage everybody to get Matthew's book because it really is wonderful, and this is just such a small sampling of what this book covers, but I also don't want to take away from Jackie because she's supposed to be talking about art now, so I'll shut up.
Sorry. After 2 years of Zoom, I still can't figure out how to unmute myself. Um, so here is a little time lapse of the process of making Raegen's cover. This one took actually about like maybe 5 times longer than the cover for the color page. Yeah, it was a very, very different process because Raegen already had like a pretty concrete idea in her mind and actually sent me a lovely sketch, which was very helpful as a jumping off point. And so I think my role was less to create something from scratch and more to bring her vision into fruition. And the process involved a lot more iterating. So for the color page, I did like one change. And then with Raegen, our back and forth email chain ended up being like 40 emails long or something. And so overall, the process was a lot more challenging, I think, not only in terms of like trying to communicate or translate someone else's vision, but also just like the technical skill and like detail involved in the piece was like pretty challenging, but it was very rewarding and I learned a lot. And I don't think I've ever made an art piece this intimately collaborative. So it was really cool to kind of get to bear witness to the workings of another artist's mind and to try to make that a reality. So yeah.
I am just so pleased and thrilled at how this turned out. And for me, it also felt truly collaborative, although I did, as Jackie said, I did have a distinct idea in mind. In fact, I sent her my awful, awful sketch, which looked even more awful once I saw her brilliant actual artwork. The way that I envisioned Medusa really related to no, I'm sorry, there will be no sharing of the sketch. It is way too embarrassing. Thank you for asking though. No, it's really bad. And actually I was like, I was thinking about this the other night. I'm like, I don't know if I put that in the contract that Jackie can't share it, but I really hope she never shares it. But yeah, it was a very concrete idea in my mind by the time I was done with the manuscript because of the way that I had re-envisioned Medusa specifically. So this idea that, you know, we don't see survivors of sexual violence walking around, you know, snakes coming out of their head. You know, these are people who look like normal people because they are normal people. And so I think you'll hear in some of the poems that I'm about to read, which focus on the head specifically, how I sort of envisioned that, and maybe you can get a sense of how Jackie's cover art then connected that idea to the actual words. So I'll start with the opening poem, which is The Gorgon's Parting Thoughts. And just for a little background on this, when a head is decapitated, a human head, I guess people have researched this, don't ask me how, but I guess like the brain keeps processing and thinking like between 20 and 25 seconds or so after it's been severed from the spinal cord. So this poem is, I think, like 22 or 23 lines. It's right in that middle. But imagine that that's happening while the words are being spoken, because that's the scene that's being set. So this is The Gorgon's Parting Thoughts. Silver slash of light like heaven, carve the exit that I've dreamt of. Etch until my neck blurts red, past your silver light to soar me, but I only drop instead like lead thoughts thunk. Did I not spit the right red prayers to lift me up? My mouth forgets now, drops words this body can't read, can't breathe, or care where thinking is thunk, and hair hisses fix me, but open neck rejects my head, and heads for which home is unknown, because only not being is free, dumb no more. I see no silver, but hear these words thunk. My last thought was flawed, was wandering and wondering why others who tried to reach me froze, but he could never have been my stone. This next poem, in my re-envisioning or reimagining of Medusa, unlike the original versions of the myth, I built out a childhood for her. And bad things happen in the childhood too. This is a poem called Sex Ed. Sex Ed came late, spring of 8th grade, before lunch and after a classmate had trouble brewing in her stomach already. They put the job in the hands of an English teacher, Miss Fithy, pretty, stupid, lean, in the habit of wearing tight jeans and propping her bottom on the edge of her desk, easily seen by boys who would flock to the front for prime viewing. Slides of the parts that flowers and cartoon characters had masked for us flashed as she matched image to word like some game, but never said what it meant if you'd already seen more than what appeared on the screen. Never confessed that naming things commands nothing. I sat silent like the dumb majority, wondering what those kids might be thinking. Interrupted by a hiss of memory unzipping, something terrible swelling in me when I thought of these bodies, another's I was forced to know with my own, and early. So this next one also is focused on the head specifically. This one in workshop, actually, we had Martha Collins join us as a guest. And this was a poem that was in progress while I was in grad school. And there was just one section of it that I couldn't unlock for whatever reason. It just didn't seem to be working. And she was actually the one who mentioned, you know, it's like, well, where's the part about the head? Like in every other part of this poem, there's some reference to the head, like where's the head? And that was the key. So thank you, Martha Collins. And this is The Spring Before Leaving Father. The spring before leaving father was winter cold and wet, and my damp hair froze at its tips as I stood at the bus stop. Father marched from the house across our singed brown yard, hat in hand, yanked it down around my head. Didn't you forget this? Summer, I'd lure young damselflies into sleeping jars trimmed with drunk cotton, their tails bouncing, sticking together blue and green, teasing neon until the next morning when I'd run to catch more. The dragonflies I avoided, One tied knots in my hair, spit out hum sounds till it settled dead in a warm, tangled nest Father had to cut from my head. When I scaled our yard's maple, Father shouted from the open door, "That's for dirty boys." And if I didn't come down, he'd strike my shins with a switch. Once inside, he'd scrub my hands raw, tell me leaves change color because water means to empty these veins, because they were dying, which is why I had to abandon them. Remember this lesson. Just before the sun came and the dirt could thaw, recall how to reclaim. Snow turned the world to a skeleton. Months in the house with suspicion stuck in my head, betraying me, creaking like the floor beneath me, leading toward a cracked door, another forbidden, frozen surface. Father's face, staring into his emptied glass. Because I forgot to actually give my trigger warning, I'm going to skip one of the more graphic poems, although none of the poems are super graphic. After the sexual violence that occurs in her adulthood, the full transfiguration of Medusa into the creature with the snakes, the full snake manifestation, I guess I should say, occurs. And the way that I envision that is through the poem Transfiguration. 1, duplicitous blood. Once my blood moved nothing like red, then ache cut down to the veins, overthrew the blue liquid my body breathes through. Now that fickle drip sticks beneath my skin in purpled pools, confused, seeking a new refuge, as if water or wine could take its place. As if the sun could stretch far enough to touch and warm me, as if red could travel far enough back to resurrect a girl felled in the grass at sunset. 2, defeated wings. My back strains beneath the weight of a black, broke divinity. Holy leaves flap in the breeze, but their words don't restore me. I can't flee this body. My mind can't find a peak to soar to. The weight of memory tethers me. 3, unblinking eyes. I'd save my gaze to search for a hero, only to find another predator's conceit. Now salt singes my sockets. Vigilant beacons forget the comfort of closing, refuse any respite from their watch. 4, hardened hands. Foolish digits will forget how they almost submitted, cringe at the thought that they once sought another's. Battle-bruised knuckles proved useless, shriek as they bend. A new mold must be poured. I swim my hands in. To burn in guilt now might make me invincible once the heat's depleted. 5, forking tongue. They might say with this spoiled mouth I slander, but they split me. My tongue senses the stench they left in stereo. Trespassers treading the end of this plank, you're the venom I retch from. 6, snaking mane. No body could bear such warfare. My head delivers riddles of persistent hisses, forbidden liberation for so long. Twisted hair springs, slithers, claims my scalp's terrain and crowns my fate. Thanks to these men, the oblivious birth of my serpents. I often try to incorporate others' work thematically or some other way, but I wanted to share another poet's work on survivorship. These are 2 small poems by Lanny Stabile, whose poetry collection, Good Morning to Everyone Except Men Who Named Their Dog Zeus, is also on this subject, although her mythological entity, I guess, is Zeus instead of Medusa. So there's a series of 5 little short kind of poems that intersperse themselves throughout her collection. And I'm going to read 2 of those. This is the second one. It's called Ground Current. Lightning is an afternoon nap with a cousin, waking to curious hands yawning along your stomach, wondering how long you've been asleep. Misses 5, direct strike. Lightning is a friend offering solace with a tongue between your legs. And when he repositions himself, you say, I'm not really sure. And he says, too late. I'm going to close with Note from the Nadir, which is my sister's favorite poem. So she requested it. This is really sort of the culmination of this sort of like awful, terrible marriage between the mind and the body as a monster, I guess. This sort of envisioning of oneself because of the violence that one has experienced. So this is Note from the Nadir. No savior awaits. These men are predators, and every girl doomed to be consumed by their smoke and mirrors. I'm testing the edges of shards with my hand, guessing the distance between cold silver, steaming red. My life's been a feast of smoke and mirrors. Best to slice through that meat with my own hand, put some distance between real and pretend, now that I know the hero I sought will never reach me, doesn't exist. Can I cut through illusion with my own 2 hands as swiftly and easily as my head sopped up what was fed? I'm certain the dream I chased never existed. There is no great epiphany. Yet my head still ingested what was fed. What can you do when part of the problem is you? You'd think there'd be some epiphany, that the equation could be worked out in one's head, but there's nothing you can do when the problem is you. Can you solve the problem of your head? Can you solve that problem with your head? Try to solve any problem in your head when the root of the problem is you. No savior awaits. These men are all the same. That problem lives in and beyond my brain. So thank goodness for sharp shards, steadfast hands. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Jackie so she can share more of her art, which I think by and large is kind of around various social justice themes, not just the ones that Matthew and I cover.
First of all, round of applause for Raegen. Woo. Okay, I'll go back to my screen share. So even though both of the covers I did were digital, I am a traditional artist at heart. So I'll just share some of my recent paintings that I've done. So this one is the last painting that I did. It's called Non-Fungible, and it's a critique of late-stage capitalism, specifically through the lens of NFTs and their environmental impact. This one is called Blessed Be the Fruit. It was in response to Roe v. Wade being overturned, and I did a fundraiser, or it is ongoing, or it'll last for until people stop buying prints, I guess. But so I've been donating all of the proceeds from print sales to the National Network of Abortion Funds, and thus far I've raised like around $400. But yeah, I can paste the link into the chat later if anyone's interested. This one is called Wishful Thinking. It's about the loss of innocence and growing up. And there was a accompanying video, but I couldn't figure out how to make it play on the same tab, so we will skip that for now. And then this one's called The Little Mermaid. So there is a video that I made. I am by no means a writer, so like all of my work will pale in comparison to what you just witnessed. I think the extent of my writing education kind of ended with Dr. Henry's class because then COVID happened. So I dabble in writing-ish, I dabble in video, but yeah, so this is, oh yeah, trigger warning that I talk abstractly about sexual assault.
It's Friday night, and your chest glows warm with the tingle of alcohol and love for your friends. It's Friday night, and the campus pulsates with life. Hallways sing with laughter. Sidewalks vibrate with bass. It's Friday night, and you're going out. Floral top that you borrowed, baggy pants that flare outward, gold hoops that slightly burden your earlobes, Doc Martens that pinch and chafe your feet. The air of the frat house is thick with the scent of vodka and testosterone. Garish multicolored lights and a constellation of red solo cups barrage your eyes. You are subsumed by the tidal wave of bodies, dragged and driven by the current. A piece of flotsam collides into you. He asks if you want to dance. You say okay, believing still in the earnestness of words. Immediately he grabs you and imposes his mouth upon yours. It's slimy, alien, shocking. You almost gag. But you don't want to be rude. You don't want to start conflict. You don't want to rock the boat. You feel like you owe him something in return for the gift of his straight male attention. So you say nothing. His hands grasp at places you don't want to be grasped. But you say nothing. The air of his room is thick with the stench of vodka and testosterone. And you say nothing. The clothes come off, and your body is bare, but your soul is more so. You say nothing. Your insides hurt, your outsides hurt, but patience is a virtue, they say, so you bear it. It's a game. It's a test. It's an exercise of willpower. It's waiting for the next episode to load while the Wi-Fi buffers. It's watching your frozen dinner rotate through the dimly lit microwave window. It's counting sheep while you twist restlessly beneath sweat-laced blankets. Your body screams pain, but your clenched jaw stifles it. It's a game. It's a test. It's a trial by fire to earn your stripes. It's a crucible of metamorphosis. Caterpillar to butterfly, bud to rose, subject to object. Stars and nebulae cloud the galaxy of your vision, and the moment of transcendence arrives. You leave behind the mere mortal vessel that confines the boundless spirit. The vessel is manhandled, choked, prodded, jerked like a marionette, tossed like a rag doll. But you float above, swaddled by a cocoon of pink-tinted clouds, serenaded by lilting birdsong, bathed by warm whispers of sun. And then you fall back down to earth. You stagger home alone in the dark, arms crossed to protect, back hunched to shrink. The chill of night is bitter and biting on your skin. You stumble to the bathroom, and wisps of blood dance in the toilet bowl like food dye and vinegar, a celebration of festivities, of death and resurrection. It reminds you of the Japanese swirling ink paintings you learned to make in first grade art class, Suminagashi. It's pretty. You laugh about it. You wake up the next morning, crust adorning the inner corners of your eyes, and you laugh about it. You go hiking with a friend, chest heaving as you trek uphill, and you laugh about it. You laugh over dinner, you laugh over homework, you laugh and you laugh and you laugh and you laugh until your tank is on E and you're forced to pull over. You're forced to be still. You sit there, heart outracing the metronome of the blinking hazard lights. You sit there, and you reckon. But you never said no. But he never asked. But you never said no. But he. But you. But.
Yeah, that's it.
It's Friday night, and your chest glows warm with
Okay, there we go. That's it. That's all I got.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Oh, no, Siri. Oh, Lord.
Hi there.
So I guess we can all just kind of unmute and open it up for questions, either to each other or from, I don't know, I can't tell if people submitted questions through the Ask a Question, perhaps. Yeah, intense. I guess I probably should have, well, I would have liked to think that the title Art Seeking Change and then reviewing our bios would have given you a sense that our work is intense. Yeah, just overall. But yeah, I don't know if, okay, no questions so far. Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if any popped up in that little widget, but if people want to ask questions, now's the time. Or we can discuss amongst ourselves, whatever you'd like to do. I'm actually curious, Jackie, when did you write that?
A couple weeks ago, maybe like 3 or 4
Nice.
weeks ago.
Okay. Did you write it in conjunction with doing that actual painting, or was the painting first and the writing after, or the writing first and the painting after, or how does your process work on that?
Mm-hmm. Usually my process is I make the painting first and then I write after, so the writing is kind of supplementary to the painting. But this time, the painting followed the writing, actually.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Okay.
Sort of a related question for both of you, and this is actually came from a mutual friend of Jackie and I's. Do you guys consciously think of an audience while you're creating your art, or is it you're writing for yourself, you're writing to get something just out there for your own mind, or during that process are you thinking, oh, this is a poem, or this is a painting, or this is a piece for somebody else, or thinking about how it might fall on other people, or is it just for self first and it lands where it lands?
Jackie, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. I don't think I consciously think about the fact that I'm creating for an audience, but I have been like on social media from a young age. I was peer pressured by my friend in 5th grade. So at age 10, I hopped on Instagram, which was not allowed. I got booted from the platform multiple times for being underage. But I think that because of that, my identity as an artist and the work that I produce has always been informed by audience feedback. And so I think that it has definitely shaped the way in subtle and overt ways in which I think and the choices I make. And I don't think it is like deliberate, but I think that it's a reality of how I've incorporated like the reception of others into my own work, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing because I think that art can be co-constitutive and it is kind of a collaboration between me and the people who receive it. So yeah.
I didn't even think about how like the social media component would actually play into that whole thing. Mainly because I'm like much older and I didn't have social media at your age. So, but I will say for me with these types of projects, so this and my memoir, these two things that I'm working on that are deeply personal in many ways, even if the story is built out as a in part fictitious myth type deal. It's very much me working alone, and kind of figuring out what I believe through the writing itself. And then however it's received when I submit it out to, journals or, publishers or whatever is how it's received. But for me, for the topics that I write about primarily and that feel very close to me and very important to me, I personally don't like it's about my relationship to my subconscious in many ways, which I discover through the act of writing and the actual writing. So it's kind of like speaking to self in many ways. And then, going to writers that I admire, reading their work, kind of reminding myself of sort of like what formally, I guess, even if it's not a form poem, what formally really resonates with me and would work within the framework of the ideas that I'm expressing. So, I mean, is it different for you, Matthew? I'm kind of curious now. Like, I mean, I don't know that this. I would think that maybe it's different for every artist, but
now I have to think about my own question. I think I'm somewhere in between. Primarily, I would say that I'm writing for myself. It's an audience of one, but at the same time, the more I've been published and the more I've had to have conversations with people about the things I've written, the more I've been thinking about, oh, right, other people will see this one day, potentially. And I've been fighting against that. I've been fighting against that changing how I write, like very passionately. I'm like, no, I'm writing this thing. And like I'm working on a manuscript right now that I'm fully aware that if it ever gets published, there are people who are going to be very upset with me. And I'm trying to not get that to change how I write things.
Yeah. That's actually kind of interesting because in some respect, I mean, if I'm understanding you correctly, it sounds like those people who might be upset with you are not not like writing colleagues or like editors at journals. These are like people in real life, right? Yeah. So with respect to that, I will say that does play into some of how I go about addressing subject matter in my work, for sure. Like there's like layers and layers upon layers of sort of like anonymity in a weird way. But I feel that in many respects is necessary for me. So not strictly because like I'm less concerned about upsetting people in real life, like people in my real life, I should say, that are not writers, than I am about protecting my sort of emotional self and well-being and creating a safe space while sharing these stories that I feel compelled to share and I believe are very important. If that makes sense. I don't know. Maybe that's contradictory.
And I'm going to throw this to Jackie in a similar way. I'm like, back in the day when you were in my class, like we would talk about that same idea of when you're composing anything, are you protecting the story or protecting like the people involved? Like if it's based off of something that's like real in some way. Jackie, when you're creating your art, I mean, for those who don't know, she has a wonderful website and like YouTube channel and like does amazing things. How do you navigate that space that there's both complete strangers across the world who are going to see things and you'll never interact with them, and then there are other folks who you went to school with or go to school with now who might come across your work?
Yeah, it has definitely been a challenge to navigate. I think I'm probably more of a sharer than the average person. So there's definitely some like stuff that I've shared with the world that like some people probably wouldn't even share with like their mom. But I think when it comes to talking about like intensely personal or emotional things, I think I need to pass a threshold of distance from it before I'm ready to talk about it. And it definitely has gone a lot easier in terms of being comfortable talking about things when I'm more like out of the thick of things and the people implicated are kind of more distant or hold less power over me. But yeah, weirdly, I think I've realized that like I don't really care that like thousands of random strangers know a lot of things about me. The segment of the audience that like makes me most uncomfortable to be aware of is like people who know me in real life. Like I think sometimes I kind of dissociate my like conception of myself and then my online persona, and then when those come into conflict, like the people from like me normal like my life are like also consuming me as a content creator, that creates a kind of weird cognitive dissonance. Yeah, and then also like going into the new environment of college and like some people knowing of me from my online presence before actually meeting me, that has created some interesting dynamics. And sometimes people are like really kind about it and it's like not weird at all, but sometimes people make it a thing and then it's like, oh, this is uncomfortable. But yeah, it's been a balancing act.
Jackie is the most famous among us, just FYI to everybody. No offense to Matthew.
No, there's none taken whatsoever. That's just a fact. That's just a fact. Yeah.
I mean, I can't even
from my
imagine what
personal
that's like.
experience-
Somebody knowing me before, like they actually meet me in real life. Like I can't even imagine that. That's like so foreign to me.
I keep some of her artwork just in my classroom, just so people are like, oh, "You taught Jackie Liu? Oh my goodness, I follow her on Instagram." And I'm like,
I
"Yeah,
will
that's
say-
right. I have street cred because I know her."
My experience from having Dr. Henry as a teacher and mentor and just amazing, incredible person in my life, the depth of his impact will outweigh any kind of breadth that I will reach ever in my life.
Thank you, but those are lies. But it's fine.
Well, I'm just
I'll
so
take it.
glad that, Matthew, our paths crossed and then you connected me with Jackie because, it's all been one way. It's all been like her, raining down the glory upon me. So I constantly get compliments on this cover. And yeah, I mean, I just can't even imagine my book without it.
It looks like we have a few questions in the question thing. Raegen, we know you're working on a memoir. Did the decision to write a full memoir stem from your poetry, and which feels more personal?
No, so the memoir is something completely different, and the poetry came while I was in grad school. The concept of Medusa, although it changed the focus of my thesis, which was also on Medusa, was really more focused on retellings of the myth. And then once I graduated, it really refocused on building out the childhood and really like a singular narrative centered around sexual violence and exploring that. It was when I was in Vegas. So after I graduated, that's where I moved, where the decision, I guess, in many respects was made for me to start a memoir because I was dealing with a loved one's addiction. And so that already feels far more personal, again, because it's a memoir. So people are going to know that some of this stuff happened to me in real life. I mean, yeah, sure, memory is faulty and all that stuff, but it's not, there aren't these layers that there are in poetry where, like there's a figure, there's a persona, there's Medusa. Am I Medusa? Well, no, I'm not, but I am sort of, but not really. But, there are truths in there from my life. There are truths in there from other people's lives. And, so it's very much like a blurry kind of soup with the poetry collection where you can, I don't want to say hide because it was not my intention to hide by that. It's my intention to actually illuminate a truth by not just claiming it as my own solely. But with a memoir, you do claim experiences solely because that's what a memoir is. So in that sense, it definitely feels far more personal. And I'm glad right now that I'm just in the process of drafting it because I know I'm going to have some feelings that are going to have to kind of play into how I rewrite that or rework things based on some of the concerns that Matthew had touched on earlier. So I guess the next question, what projects can we look forward to from each of you? And so I already answered that. So Matthew and Jackie, feel free to take it away.
I'm currently, I guess what I was working on today. I just sent out to a publisher to consider and reject, and then I'll revise it after that, is a chapbook of poetry that is, I guess it's sort of looking at being a Black teacher in a predominantly white institution. And the metaphor is that on the one hand and being in a toxic relationship. And so sort of you progress through the book and should be wondering, is this poem about being a teacher or is this poem about being in a toxic romantic relationship? And the answer is usually, yeah, yes, no, but, and which is already, someone's already mad about me. The book's not even out yet. And someone heard me talking about it on Twitter, thought I was just talking about them personally. So they're already mad at me. And I'm like, whatever, it is what it is. So I just dedicated the book to them. So, that'll go over well.
I feel like that's a little self-incriminating.
Yeah. At this point, I'm already in trouble. So why, whatever. Jackie, what about you? What are you working on?
In the immediate future, I'm currently working on, so I've been like pairing time lapses of my painting processes with more general like video essay commentary things about the painting itself, but then also like broader topics. So the most recent piece I did, non-fungible, I'm making a video about that and about NFTs, crypto in general, its ties to environmental destruction, excesses of capitalism, etc. And then also more generally about like the whole notion of selling out as an artist and like the commodification of art, and if there's any kind of like purity, like philosophical purity that an artist should try to abide by, or if that's just like a bunch of elitist bullshit. But yeah.
I really appreciate Jackie's candor, and I also appreciate foul language. There is, it looks like one last question. So regarding being a writer, poet, do you have any advice for becoming part of the wider poetry community? What are some ways to find your people and getting yourself out there as a poet writer? And which is very different, obviously, than getting yourself out there as an artist, which Jackie has done quite successfully. Poetry is not nearly as cool. So unfortunately, sadly for Matthew and me. Do you want to shoot for that one, Matthew, first?
Sure. I'm an introvert and a hermit in real life, but people never realize that. And so I've never been one who like is going out to conferences or like a part of groups other than like my MFA program. And so a lot of the community that I have found has been through Twitter. I've met like a ton of Raegen included. Like I've met some great people, and a lot of the writing opportunities that I found, a lot of the like I've been able to edit certain things, and like Pigeonholes just brought me on as an associate poetry editor. Like so many things have come just through people I've met through Twitter, and like the community is wonderful. I know when people hear Twitter, they're like, ew, and it's like, no. Writer Twitter is pretty awesome. Like we've got a nice little like community, and we keep all the crazy away. So Twitter, that would be my response.
Yeah, and I would actually agree with that. And also, I forgot to say I typed it because you were still talking, and I got really excited. But congratulations on on your new role at Pigeonholes. That's very exciting. Somebody who asked this, David. So if you do get on social media, I'm on primarily on Twitter. I'm also on Instagram and more privately on Facebook. But I think that so conferences can be tricky because it's a place of privilege, right? You have to have money, a significant amount of money to put aside for that. You have to be able-bodied. You have to be able to take time off work or be independently wealthy somehow to where that doesn't affect you. So I don't think that conferences are necessarily the best way, but I do think that there are a ton of free tools out there. And actually, the fact that you ended up here, however you got here, is a really good sign, and that you're wanting to engage with the greater community. And I happen to not just be like a poetry person, but in another life, I did marketing and communications at a university. And so I often kind of help people learn how to do some of that, in addition to just kind of building like a general presence on social media. You can use social media in two different ways. You can engage with people, and I think that that's helpful. If you want to feel connected and part of a larger community, But you can also use social media in a really useful way that I think Matthew was kind of pointing to, where you're finding opportunities that you wouldn't necessarily find elsewhere or as easily. You'd have to kind of do a lot of research and stuff. And so I would actually encourage you, if you're not already kind of engaging with a group of people on social media, to try that for starters and kind of see how it works. And also don't be discouraged if it takes a little while, because I think people find their own sort of like personas, like Jackie kind of touched on, and individual kind of flair, as it were, in building an online presence. Everybody has a sort of style or thing that they're kind of known for, I think, eventually. And you don't have to like sit there and like, okay, what do I need to be known for? You don't have to think about it like that. Just let it develop naturally from your own personality. But I'll say, like, just as an example, I met Matthew through a person named Jared Beloff, which I'm hoping I'm pronouncing his last name right, because we were part of an anthology together that he edited. And I wouldn't have seen that anthology call had I not been on Twitter, but that opened a whole world of opportunity. And now I'm connected to all of those writers in the anthology. And now I'm connected to Jackie. And so, there are a lot of decent people on, like, in literary Twitter, whatever, that you can kind of tap into and connect with. There are some bad eggs, I'm not going to lie. But our community is great in that those people get called out, and you get to make choices on who you mute and block and all that stuff. But that's like getting way into the weeds. And anyway, I'm rambling, as I tend to do. You found two fellow writers here. Connect with us online, and if there are certain questions that you have, ask us. They can be private. You can, I won't offer Matthew's DMs. I'll offer my DMs because I know some people are like super anti-DM. But anyway, please feel free to connect. I think that's it.
That was amazing.
Thank you all
Thank you
so much. You're so incredibly talented, and we're so happy that we got to host you. And you're all so insightful, and we will keep our eyes out for all of your upcoming work.
So talented. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you again for having us.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you.
Anytime.
So yeah, if you want, because people will be able to see the chat afterwards, if you want to put any of your handles in for people to follow, feel free to put them in the chat. And yes,
And the green button.
And the green button, so you guys can be supported. It brings you right to their books, which feature Jackie's beautiful artwork. And I think that's it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and we hope you enjoyed yourselves.
Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.